Welcome, everyone. I want to thank you for being a part of today's 100 Women to Watch panel. We're going to talk about something called the truth filter. Our conversation today is about women leaders on media literacy and the power to discern. What does that even mean, right? To get into that, but first I just want to let you know that this theme was inspired by a deep and important conversation with Dr. Brandi Sims, who reminded me that misinformation spreads faster than truth and that digital influence often requires powerful discernment, right? Especially now, more than ever. When we lose clarity, unfortunately, we can lose our ability to protect ourselves, to our communities, even the futures that we're building. So we get to talk about all of that today. And we are gathered here because each woman on this stage is shaping narratives that matter. Each of you is doing the work of helping people really think critically, question confidently, and also see beyond the noise, because there's lots of noise out there. So each of you are really helping communities reclaim sovereignty over what they believe in and why. So this is an organic, heart-led dialogue. We'll explore how media shapes perception, how power shifts when truth is honored and not honored, and also how women leaders are uniquely positioned in order to strengthen trust in a world that profits from confusion. So thank you all for joining us, and let's go ahead and hop right into our conversation courageously together and explore this truth. I've got one question, Dr. Sims. If you could let us know a little bit about where this kind of came from, inside of you, and what it is that you've experienced that has led you to want to have this conversation today.
Of course, I'd be happy to, and excited to be a part of an incredible panel like this again, and having conversations like this that are so important to not only our industry, but across the board, right? So what inspired this event and really this panel was our conversation around media literacy, and more specifically, the discernment aspect of what is real news and how to discern and be able to identify what is the real and what is the fake. And a lot of this was inspired by just those experiences, conversations. I can tell you, just now completing my PhD in strategic media communication, my dissertation topic was on post to action, and specifically targeting and specifically focusing on the Capitol insurrection and the Trump assassination attempts last year, and to identify how social media influenced these events and these activities that took place. And in going through the research and in going through the data and the analytics that are available, I was really shocked to find that not only one, there's a lack of media literacy that's available here, but there's also a lack of regulation. There's a lack of just general legislation in regards to social media, but the influence itself is profound. And within that, when you look at things like media literacy and where it is actually available, it's not hitting the areas where it really truly needs to be. The average consumer isn't a college student. The average consumer now are getting younger and younger. It's becoming more widely accessible. And because of that, and as a result of that, you have more instances of disinformation and misinformation getting a hold of them. And so for that, this is where we have to open up that conversation and that dialogue around how are we as leaders within this profession in this field making a point in making it a necessity to educate people on what media literacy is, what they should be looking for when they're looking at the news, especially when we get into digital platforms. Now that we have oodles and oodles of blogs, we have oodles and oodles of podcasts and different forms of digital media, all of which don't traditionally fall within our traditional media framework, in that there are protections like the FCC and guidelines and ethics and all of those things. And these platforms, they don't have those same protections against them. And really, protections for the consumer. So with that, you're essentially looking at the wild, wild west that is the internet right now. And right now, we're also seeing that as it's growing, more people are on it and more people are tuning in, even more so than they are traditional media. So hence is where we have the problem is we've got a lot of people online, more people are tuning in online, more people are getting their news online, but online does not have the same regulations, reporting, filtering, things like that that we expect from our traditional media. They don't. And so, because of that, and as a result of that, we have a lot more spread of misinformation. We have a lot of more people that are simply unaware. And this is, again, why it's so important that we have conversations like this and why media literacy is so important. The average consumer isn't getting this information. And because they're not, they are more likely and more susceptible to get misinformed, which can lead to deadly consequences, as I mentioned in the events of last year and even really the last several years that we've seen.
Beautiful. Really nice to meet you, Brandi.
Yeah,
My
same
name's
here.
Allison Scher. Yeah, and I just published a book called The Social Contagion, and it explores how the media has radicalized American politics since the onset of COVID. So our fields of research definitely intertwine. And what I have been diving into recently that has piqued my interest around the topics that we're discussing today is this idea of good faith versus bad faith communication. And when we are living inside of what has become an information war, where both traditional and non-traditional digital outlets seem to be politically captured in one way or another, and they're radicalizing populations based on the information that they're spreading, how can we as individual people who are involved with the media or not involved with the media, how can we restore this concept of good faith communication where we're attempting to figure out collectively what is fact and what is fiction? Because what I see inside of the digital environment right now is an atmosphere that breeds bad faith communication, where people identify with a certain in group and they start like little online battles with the out group that they're taught is like the enemy in their political fight. So in that kind of environment, it's incredibly hard to come together as communities and as just normal people who are all collectively caught inside of this, regardless of where your allegiances might stand politically. Like, it is a democratic virtue that we inside of this country get to have these conversations, but it seems like it's harder and harder for people to engage in that inside of the culture war that we're living in. And the outcome of bad faith communication is typically like a mutually assured destruction or escalation into physical wars. So that's where my interest has peaked. And in my book, I focus on the last 5 years because I think during COVID and since then, and the Trump administration as well, we have seen an extreme escalation of misinformation and an extreme escalation in just like bad faith communication that has made people, I think, incredibly scared and weary to share their voices in a positive way.
I love how you're touching on the emotional aspect of this too, Allison, because like, what are people supposed to think? Are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to feel, with the onset of all of this different type of media? I remember watching one of my relatives go through TikTok to look for health advice. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is happening here? And there were things that were, spread around about taking baths with bleach and borax. And I was like, what on earth is happening? So I love that here, not only are we talking about tools to discern, but we can also talk about, what's the impact, and how do we actually go about that process, of, deciding what can be used and what can be tossed. So I'm curious, Leilani and Lynn, can you share a bit about your role in the media, and also your approach to media consumption, and how that impacts you most days recently?
Yeah, I mean, I can add something. So I'm a journalist. Right now I'm working with BBC, and one of the things that I think about a lot is the way that so we confirmation bias is a thing, right? We have a tendency to believe things that we already think are true. So that's, I think, a big part of what happens when you're talking about people looking for information on social media. It's like it has exacerbated our tendency to be like, well, I trust this person, right? Because they look like me, because they believe what I believe, because whatever. Even if they don't have any background or knowledge in what we're looking for, right? So, what you're talking about, Kai, your relative looking on TikTok, they're looking for somebody that they identify with, not necessarily that actually knows what they're talking about. And I feel like that is a major issue when we're talking about getting your information from social media. It's like, social media is about influencers, right? People who, look a certain way, talk a certain way, say things that, are attractive, are entertaining, but not necessarily that are true. And so I guess the question becomes, how do we pull people back into a state of, I guess, it's skepticism, but like skepticism about your own beliefs. Because I think that what we've done is we've created an extreme skepticism about things that we don't agree with. But then the tendency to just believe anything that sort of, matches up with what we already think, which is, like I said, it's confirmation bias, but I think that social media has really exacerbated that. And I guess one of the things I think about a lot as a journalist is how do you like get that back, without also becoming an influencer yourself, right? And maybe that is the case, that is the answer, is that journalists need to be more dynamic. We need to have more entertaining news, but then I think there's a problem with that as well. So it's like it's a really complex topic, I think, as somebody that is in journalism. Like, how do I address this problem, and how do I make sure that, even beyond the ethics and making sure that my information is correct, how do I make sure that, like, my readers trust me, and that's kind of a big thing that I think a lot of journalists are struggling with.
Well, according to the Pew Research Center, I just want to jump in really quick because I think I told you about this study that just came out this year, but 1 in 5 Americans rely on news influencers for their news. And that should be alarming, not just as an academic, but just as a professional, because that means that someone who is not a professional, not an expert, doesn't have the same ethics and guidelines to guide what they're presenting as fact, right? They're presenting news to people, and people are consuming more information from them than actual people that are reporting and having to provide your references and provide your sources. They're not relying on it. They're relying on this. 1 in 5 of Americans rely on news influencers to find out what's happening in the world. That should be not only alarming, but kind of scary, because anyone can purchase a microphone, anyone can publish their thoughts. But when those thoughts become, I guess what you could say, what they believe to be fact, kind of what you just mentioned, that's where we have a problem because it's not fact. In fact, it's farther from fact, more fiction, but people believe this. And how many instances does this happen where we have people believing these things and now it starts to impact their behaviors because they believe this to be true because it's coming from someone that they like and not someone that is an expert within the space.
I think something else that I think is interesting is I also think part of how we got here is the like not seeing yourself in media, in journalism. Like, so, I mean, I think about, I've been a journalist for about 15 years now, and I'm still often the only woman of color in the newsroom. You know what I mean? And I think that I have sympathy and understanding for people that are like, well, this, news outlet doesn't reflect me. I'm going to go to this influencer who is from my neighborhood, who's from my community, whatever. But then it's like, okay, but do they actually know what they're talking about? Do they have the ethics? Did they actually research? Did they actually talk to people? And it's like, it's a really difficult thing. And like, I tend to feel like the answer would be, well, okay, then we need to get people that actually are trained, that actually are doing the work, that actually do reflect these communities in the media. But, that's easier said than done. And I think it's sort of more difficult in some ways now.
I guess I'm one of these people that gets a lot of my information from social media as well. So I'm a guilty party in that. And just forewarning there. When we talk about media consumption, one of the things that I've really noticed, because again, I'm doing a lot of marketing for people via social media. So I'm on social media so much for client work. And what I found is that I've really been able to get more of a well-rounded view if it's just from that standpoint when I'm looking through all these different lenses of different types of people because I have different types of clients. So what's been quite alarming for me noticing the past it's been really drastic as the years have been going on. It's getting worse and worse and worse, where social media is literally catering to all of our different viewpoints and biases and all of these different things and feeding us everything that we want to hear. And you see it when you're going in and looking at someone's account to do a post, and then it's showing something about the same topic in a completely different way. So then we take it to the next step where we're talking about how you guys are referencing the different news that news may show up on social media, but it's showing up in sound bites. So then we have another level of misinformation happening because people are taking things out of context because they're not looking at the full picture here. They're looking at different sound bites and pieces. So, it's really, the whole situation is quite alarming. I don't have any solutions that have been popping up in my mind for it, other than the fact that I continue to say, you know what, this has worked really well for me to just find out more places to get my information via offline, online, all over the place. Now I consume from so many different places. And it really has expanded my mind. I cannot say that I have a firm opinion on this or that or the other. But what I can say is that I don't have this closed perspective. And I think the closest I've felt toward, a way that we can move forward as a whole, as a society, is get people to understand and really finally, as a collective, open up their minds and hearts to understand that we are all being programmed, and we're being programmed by people who are siphoning our wallets. And so, as long as people are just putting the importance more on, they want to feel warm and fuzzy because someone agrees with them and this is validating my perspective, as long as people put that as a first priority, we're not going to get anywhere. So, we have to start telling people in different ways, like, hey, it's more important that you face some of the things you believe may be right or wrong or some gray area in between, but let's look at all of these things so we can start to recognize inconsistencies where someone might be lying and someone might be telling the truth, and start to understand things we learn in college about all the different terminology, was it hyperbole and all these different, you guys know the words, but there's things that are happening right in our face that have a name for it. We took a class on this and we're taking it for truth. And there's all of this stuff. It's like, wait, that's not actually a fact. You just catered to an emotion. And I'm like, yes, that's what I'm going to do. No, that's not a fact. That's not a fact. So again, I just think it's so important for us to start with what are many different forms of consumption that we can be looking at as avenues for where we get our information.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I
Jump
was going to
in.
jump in. Leilani, you said something that I do this myself, where I try to like make myself uncomfortable with what I read, and I think that like it really makes a difference. Like I think that like a not having hard beliefs on things when you feel like this is the truth, absolutely. That it's like, is it though? You know what I mean? That's when I start to question. Oh wait, where did I get that? And then being able to be uncomfortable, being able to read something or view something that is like that makes you uncomfortable without being like, oh, this is totally not true. Like, you know, without and interrogate it to be like, well, okay, what is it? A, what is it that's making me uncomfortable? Right? B, can I validate this in any way? Is there a way for me to look and see how true this is? You know, doing the extra step, I think it makes a big difference. And being willing to be wrong and to be uncomfortable are like huge. And I think that in some way is like, for me, the kernel of the problem is that nobody wants to be uncomfortable, right? Like everybody wants to like feel validated. Everyone wants to get the warm fuzzies, you know, or even to feel angry. I think there's that too, that people, there's something about being outraged that we enjoy in some way, you know, and as opposed to just being like, all right, I'm just gonna be uncomfortable. I'm not gonna be outraged. I'm gonna be uncomfortable, and I'm gonna let that sense of uncomfortableness make me look deeper into this. Um, I think that's a big thing we all need to start doing, you know?
Now, I will say this, for me, it probably sounds really crazy, but working in PR for 15 years and then switching on to the journalist and reporting side for the last 5, one thing that I started to do was I subscribed to all of the news outlets. And again, I know this sounds crazy, but largely it was because I wanted to get more perspective because after learning and researching and being able to observe that, we can become and join our own echo chambers without even thinking about it, without even knowing it, right? And if you want to be a part of the solution, you have to address that. So part of that is opening up that perspective. I think Leilani kind of said it so perfectly. It's opening up your perspective. Well, part of that means you need to go into that lane, go into the areas where you aren't as comfortable and just see how they see things. And for that, I think that opened up my mind to, okay, at least I know where you're coming from and why you think the way that you do. And also, not only that, but also just how news and information is presented from this end versus what I'm used to, right? So I subscribe to Fox News, I subscribe to CNN because I want to see both sides. I subscribe to the New York Times and Washington Post. I want to see that perspective too. I subscribe to all these things so I can get all of the information and see it just as it is and lay it out. And then from there, I can be able to discern, okay, what are we working with and what's the facts within all of these that we're gathering. There's a great sites now. One that I really love, it's called All Sides, and it actually shows all of the different media outlets and what they're reporting all in one website. So on there you can see, and they rate it, which is a really great tool too. They rate it to let you know, okay, is this far left? Is this far right? Is this about neutral? And I think that's something too that's super, super helpful if for somebody that is I just want to get the news. I just want to see what's going on in the world and what's going on around me just without the fluff. Okay, well, here you go. Here's a site that can give you all of those things and just lay it out in front of you. And so from that point, you can decide, okay, what information I'm going to take in the most unbiased, neutral, and objective way possible. That I think is the way that we can start to improve upon is sharing these types of resources, but also opening up our perspective and being open to see a different side of things and aid to your discernment.
Yeah, I love All Sides. There's also Ground News. There's also bias detection software that can be used with artificial intelligence. So you can put the media that you're ingesting through the software, and it'll be able to flag keywords that have like a certain sentiment analysis to them. And they'll be like, this is inflammatory language, this is biased language, can rewrite articles without the bias. And yes, of course, there's a margin of error for everything, but tools that do present solutions to the epistemological crisis we're finding ourselves in as far as media, like are like coming out. And I think the crux of the issue that we're dealing with has a lot to do with just the monetization of content and how disruptive technologies like the smartphone. I remember I graduated college like with a journalism degree right when the smartphone was invented. And I knew at that point, like, it was going to be so hard to find a high-paying journalism job because, like, people expect content to be free. They expect information to be free. But all of us who work in this field know how time-consuming it is to try to actually gather conscientiously and disseminate good information, right? So until we as consumers of media can start to support with our money alternative types of news outlets that are working very hard to restore that neutrality, that typical old school journalism, it was very characteristic of that. Like we're in the attention economy, and these biases and our own emotional addictions to outrage and the algorithms and all the other stuff that is capturing our attention is going to continue to dominate people's feeds. And even the larger corporate media still have to worry about advertisers and where their money's coming from and people paying attention and tuning into their channel. So it's also about like where we as a public are putting our attention and then backing that with our dollar as well.
I don't mean to talk too much, but I want to say that absolutely, Allison, that is like one of the things that I say all the time is like, the people who pay for the news are the people that the news serves. And if you're not paying for your news, it's not you. You know what I mean? Like if we have companies paying for news, if we have, advertisers, et cetera, like that's who the news is serving. And when you talk about influencers, like they're getting advertisements from whomever, and that's who's paying them, and that's who they're serving with that information. And I think it's something that I don't think people really think about. Like even in the sense of like, so like I said, I've been a journalist for a long time, and I was freelance for a very long time. And just thinking about like, you used to be able to be a staff writer where you would investigate. I was just talking about the guy that broke the news about the cigarettes causing cancer. He worked on that story for like a year. You can't do that now. You don't have a salary to like investigate one story for a year. You've got to just crank it out and get it gone. But like that means that there is stuff happening that no one is actually investigating, right? There are stories like that are out there that are very just, getting brushed under the rug because there's nobody to actually uncover them because we're not paying our journalists. No one's paying for the news. You know what I mean? So I just, yeah, that's huge. That's a huge thing that I think people don't think about.
Wow, such great points. Yeah, Brandi.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to Lynn's point there, it immediately popped in my mind of just why public media is so important. And now we're seeing the target on the back of public media to essentially dismantle it. Well, it's problematic in many ways, starting with the fact that it's a loss of jobs, it's a loss of our staff, for journalists and reporters that need to be reporting unbiased, neutral, objective news. But it's also a problem for the general public, right? With all of the paywalls that are increasing in order for people to get news, what does that leave for people who are looking and seeking news? That leaves social media. And again, not harping on social media, but I'm harping on it a little bit. We've got the wild, wild west of news at this time. So when they're getting news from social media, you have to beg the question, okay, who's the source? Where's it coming from? Do they have references? Do they have that objective information there, or are they simply sharing an opinion? And that's problematic. It's problematic, and it's troubling because we've got people that can't access the most factual and the best information possible because now there's a paywall barrier in front of them. So they can't access it. Well, what's the next best? Okay, it's social media. Okay, so opinion mostly. There are some filtered in there that are actual news, but often it gets overshadowed. I think it was mentioned earlier about he who pays makes the rules. Well, if they're paying and pushing that stuff out, that's what's getting pushed. Well, that's what people are seeing. And so then you have the presentation of that issue too, is that the only things that are getting pushed are what is being fed to the algorithm. So it definitely presents just a host of different issues and challenges, but this is why, we should be actively supporting our public media and not allowing it to be dismantled, because then it's going to aid to the crisis that we're already in that misinformation and disinformation taking off, and ultimately people not having access to information without the paywall being right in front of them to do so. It shouldn't be a thing, but it is now a real thing.
It certainly is. And, now you've got people who are operating in kind of like different realms of reality, right? You've got people who are subscribing to the reality shows and only know what's going on based on that, and those perspectives. And then you've got the movies, where there's this really interesting and intriguing enmeshment between, showing what's happening on the news in the movies and people discerning that between what's actually happening on the news in the real world. So I'm curious here, as leaders, how do we approach conversations with individuals who are operating from a completely different version of reality that may be shaped by misinformation? Like, how did Thanksgiving dinner go for y'all?
What's funny is I went to a bar on Saturday to get like late night food. And there was this woman sitting next to us, and she struck up a conversation with us, and she was maybe a little hammered, but we started arguing about politics, and we were arguing about politics in the Middle East. And my fiance was like, let's go. Come on, like, let's go right now. And I was like, no, let's stay. Like, let's stay and try to have a beautiful conversation. And we had very different information around history and documentaries we had watched. And I was like, no, this happened in this date. And she's like, that didn't happen 100 years ago. I was like, yes, it did. And then at the end of it, she had just like broken up with her boyfriend. And she was like, I'm 50. I was like, you don't have a single wrinkle, honey. And then she was like, I love you. And we like hugged it out at the end of this kind of heated debate. And I was like, and she's like, it's okay that we can disagree. She's like, it's okay. Like, you're still my sister. And I'm like, yeah, I am. And we just kind of girled out about, I just like complimented her around her appearance. And I'm like, yeah, I see you. I love you. And it's okay. And it was great. And then can I be a little on PC right now?
It's your mic.
Yeah, it's my mic. So she turned to me and she was with these people. She's like, the people next to me are Trump supporters. And I'm not about that, but they got me the best weed. And she was like, and if I hadn't like been open to being their friends, and like they're like, now we're friends, and like finding ways to connect to the humanity beyond the narratives that we are very vehemently like emboldened by and impassioned by. And that's what I mean when I say like good faith communication. And there's certain hallmarks to what that feels like. And when you're engaging in it because you feel it. And the one hallmark of good faith communication is not that you agree on everything. It's that it's safe to actually disagree, but we're not character assassinating the other. We're not cherry picking our information. We're not misleading with facts. We're staying open, and the ultimate goal of it is to connect. It's not to agree. And the idea that we have to agree in order to engage in a conversation is part of the problem, in my opinion. It's just that we don't have the skills to learn how to disagree peacefully. I think that's it. Yeah. So anyways, I hope my story wasn't too off kilter, but it happened, and it made me think of everything we're talking about, because I was like, this was a step forward.
Hey, well said, Allison. I mean, as you were speaking, I was just thinking of just the basic issue with all of this. And to me, there's a lack of humanity in people. There's a lack of care. And that's why we can't have the conversation. There's a lack of awareness, there's a lack of care, but there's that basic lack of humanity. At the end of the day, we're all people working jobs, having families, trying to live the American dream, whatever that is, and whatever that means for you. And we lose sight of that because of this us versus them attitude in any which way that we can. We find a way to us versus them. It's us, and then it's them, and it's them, and then it's us. And that's where the conversation is challenging. But I think how we can really improve upon this is by addressing the elephant in the room, and addressing the idea of humanity, that you're still a person, whether we agree, disagree, or agree to disagree, right? We're still humans, and we're still trying to navigate as best as we can. Now, for me, my story wasn't as fun as yours. Wasn't a bar conversation, but it might as well have been. It was a buddy of mine that is dun dun dun, dun Republican, conservative, MAGA. And we have conversation. We have a lot of conversations, We have a lot of debate, but we keep it respectful. So I have the benefit of that. But one day he had seen that I had posted about PBS being defunded and some of the programs that will be lost and all of that good stuff. And he reached out and was just like, hey, what is this thing you posted on that Facebook? And I'm like, oh my gosh, here we go. What do you want to know about it, Mark? What's going on? And he was just like, well, what's happening? I didn't read about that they're getting defunded. And I was like, well, I mean, it's all over, but yes, it is getting defunded, and this is what's going on. And we just had a conversation about it. And he was actually just kind of surprised that this was happening, but he was also just as surprised at all the things that would be impacted as a result of it. And similar to what I said earlier about the problem with lack of access to public media, it goes down to the general public. Not everybody has the whatever $27, $30 a month to spend on their favorite newspaper, or the now $80 for Hulu, and so on and so forth. Not everybody has that. And when you start tallying up the score, it gets really expensive. So when you start to factor all of that in, if you just put yourself in that person's shoes to say, hey, I just need to know what's going on, my local news or my regional news or state, national, or all of the above. I just need to know what's happening in the world. Well, if I have to pay XYZ to get to it, I'm not going to have access to it because I simply cannot afford it. I can't afford to have it. And in which case, I have to rely on what is readily accessible and available, which is my phone, my mobile device. And so because of that, it is the reason why there's so many issues with that. It's the lack of access to information that you should rightfully have access to without having these barriers to prevent you from having access to it. It shouldn't be the case, but that's what we're dealing with now. And that's why it's problematic. So when I broke it down to him in that way, it was kind of like a light bulb, like, oh, okay, I see what you mean. But again, it goes back to the earlier point of just putting yourself in another person's shoes and finding the humanity in a person. Just because you can afford it doesn't mean that the average person can. A lot of people are struggling right now. And that $27 for a subscription, I keep saying that, but a lot of subscriptions, they're going up. They are going up, and they add up fast. And unfortunately, it isn't, I don't think it's accessible or attainable now, depending on where you're at in life. It's not accessible and it's not attainable. And thus, this is why we have a problem with it. People should be able to have access at the basic level. their news information. You should have access to it. And that's it. But find the humanity in the person. And that's where we can really start having a conversation.
Yes, humanity. Leilani, you got something to say about that?
Yeah. So I love, first of all, thank you so much. I'm loving this conversation. It is so, so good. I feel like the public is becoming more discerning by nature, just because of the shift that's been happening so long with so many different pieces of information out there that's been false for so long, especially, you know, when I found a shift, I felt like there was a shift during the beginning of COVID where people started to become experts in being marketed to. Like, oh, somebody's marketing to me and I understand what's happening. And maybe they're telling the truth, maybe they're not, but I see what's happening. And they're actually able to watch the person or the company who is sharing something with them. And that's when people wanted to know the personal brand more so separate from a company logo. And all of these things started happening because people had actual time where they could sit there and listen to what they were consuming. I mean, what was interesting too during that time, there was even a lot more animals being brought into the vet because people were noticing that their pet was sick when before they'd been racing and racing and racing for so long, they didn't even know that their pet who they love so much had ailment going on. So all of a sudden these vets had all of these pets to help heal and all these things going on. So even though, you know, it feels like, oh, like all of this information and where do we go and where do we get it from? There's also a shift where people are being self-accountable, even people who don't even know they're doing this, because it affects them in their bottom. It affects their household. Everything they're buying is coming from online for the most part, versus the way we used to just run out and shop all the time. We're at least buying 1 or 2 things a week online, no matter who you are, where you're getting it from. So you have to understand how to really protect yourself and your family and the money, you know, that's going on. And then, so the ways I've been seeing this kind of show up on my end is people want to see more content that is more organic. It's not curated as much. People want to see, you know, someone with not a whole lot going on, because a whole lot going on is like, wait, I got to evaluate this and that and this and that, instead of someone just coming to talk to me. And so now I think what's going to wind up happening over time is you're going to see people really rely on these sources, like how you talked about all sides. And there was one other reference one of you made, I think it was you, Allison, to another place we could look as well. So I think what's going to wind up happening is naturally this is going to start becoming the norm, where we're able to look and say, something is a little bit off about that. We may not be able to pinpoint it, but then we'll say, you know, I'm going to get my information here. And we're teaching ourselves this. So it may not be regulated, but we are learning how to regulate some things on our own. So we're not really screwed over is really what's going on.
Got it. There's an optimistic flair there. I like it. So as we wrap up today, because this has been such a great conversation where we get to come from all of these different angles and perspectives and approaches, right? So let's kind of everyone a way to, you know, perhaps contribute, you know, to that optimistic angle. And I'd love to ask each one of our panelists, what is one skill that a person can continue to develop in order to navigate this world that has AI generated content, deep fakes, blurred lines, and truth fabrications? You know, like, what's that one skill that you would recommend that that person who is watching this continues to develop? And can you also share where a find you out in the world and online? Allie, you wanna? Oh, Lynn, you got this.
I can jump in. Yeah. So the one thing I think that people can cultivate that can sort of help in this situation is soft skepticism. So like this idea of like, question things, particularly things that you have a knee-jerk like reaction to, whether it be positive or negative. Like, question those things harder, but also just be open to changing your mind. So that's why I'm saying sort of soft skepticism. And then your other question was where to find me. So I'm online. You can find me at literarylyn.com is my website. You can read some of my stuff at BBC, at Lonely Planet, all over the place. Lynn Brown. And yeah, I think that's it.
So what I would say is that we are very rapidly progressing into a society where a lot of our human logic and computational skills is going to become outsourced by artificial intelligence. So to me, the optimism and the skill is the resistance against outsourcing your own intuition to technology, toward a corporation, toward whatever. And as many of us know, that's an incredibly elaborate skill to develop, to be able to trust oneself and one's instincts and one's own perceptions. And it's imperative for us to be able to navigate the world. So my suggestion for your question, Kai, is to remember to tap in that we have an intelligence inside of our own bodies as humans that can really help us navigate this wild west and the insanity of the digital space and the information ecosystem we're living in.
Ooh, that is so huge, Allison. Ooh, that right there. This piece inside of us that we don't talk about, right? Because it's not logical. This animal instinct that animals, they survive not with words, not with facts. It's like, I feel this, I'm out, or I'm this way or that way just because I feel, and it works, right? It is a real thing. And we know when something's off, and we know we need to learn to follow that. It's hard to say one thing, but I'll just talk about motives. I think if we understand someone's motivation for what they're sharing with us, then it's going to help us to decipher whether it's information that it's a source that we want to listen to or not. So if somebody's trying to make money, that's great. It could be a great thing for us still, but now we get to go and follow that, and see where that leads as well. So just understanding motives, vision of the person, and what they care about, who's sharing that information with us is a huge piece. Oh, and I can be found at, sorry about that. I can be found at leilanimedia.com or on LinkedIn and Instagram is where I hang out the most. Leilani M. Wells on Instagram. Leilani is spelled Leilani. There you go.
Awesome. And also we've got Allison, your website, and also a link to your book. Can you just re-presence the book for us and what that's about?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I realized I didn't answer that part. So my website's AllisonShare.com. You can see how it's spelled right here underneath my image. And my book is called The Social Contagion. The subtitle is Viral Ideologies and the Culture War for America's Future. So please check that out. You can purchase it on Amazon.
Sweet. Thank you. And for everyone who's watching, just know that if you're on Facebook, you can find everyone's links in the comments of this video. If you're on YouTube, you'll find the comments in this video. If you're on LinkedIn, you can look up everybody's name here. We've got one more who's going to wrap it up. And that's Dr. Brandi Sims. And also, Brandi, can you also kind of sum it up based on maybe your expectations, for this conversation and what has been revealed for you?
Oh, absolutely. Well, definitely. I was going to say, well said, Leilani. I think it's so important. Motive is a big aspect that people should be adopting, I should say, as one of their skill sets to really decide and determine what's the best for them and what information is relative. But yeah, to kind of wrap it up, I think for me, the skill set that people really need to utilize is one, making sure to verify the source. Always verify the source. I dropped in the chat here another Pew Research study that showed that over 52% of people in America do not know how to discern between a real news story versus a fake one. So, with that, that lets us know, just kind of summing up in this conversation, that there is still the challenge of people not really knowing what to look for. So, that's why I would say being able to properly identify a real news source, a real news story, and by identifying that source, ask the question, so where is the source? Okay, where did it come from? Okay, I found it on Fox News. Okay, well, where did they get that information? What was the sample pool of individuals that participated in the study? Ask those types of questions as your follow-up, and that'll give you everything you could possibly need in determining, okay, is this information legitimate, or is it just something that someone may have seen, or it's just kind of an opinion, right? That's the way that you can really hone in and really develop that discernment on what is real and what is fake and what is the in between for you. But I definitely think moving into the future, as we're talking about the inclusion of artificial intelligence, deep fake, this is going to be even more important when you're asking those questions of, okay, where did this come from? Is this legitimate? Like this all ties into that. And what I see is more than likely what we'll have, and it might be in this next administration. I don't think it's going to happen with this one, but we'll see a lot more training and education within media literacy. Kaidi, I've told you numerous times, it is my goal in the academic space now. If we can take media literacy education from not limiting it to just college and getting it into high schools and even younger, I think that will be our win, because the younger that you are accessing social media and online communications, the more that you need to be prepared and be aware of what to expect. Because right now, there is no armor, there is no shield for those children and those young adults that are accessing this so early, terribly early, in my opinion. And that's where we, again, as professionals, have a duty and have a responsibility. How can we help in determining and educating people? So I think in the future, you're going to start to see more media literacy programs coming to be, and really preparing younger people, and as well as, let's be honest, our age group and older, with a better idea of what to expect online and how to truly discern between what it is that you're looking at, what is an authentic source, and what is actually more of an opinion and fiction, I'll say. So that's kind of what I foresee moving forward, and hope that I'll be a part of that transition into getting more people educated and comfortable with being online and not being totally confused or completely lied to. Well, to an extent, right? But that being said, definitely always open for a conversation. You can follow my page at brandingpr.com. This is where my PR agency is. You can also follow us on all the social media, Branding PR. And if you want to talk to me directly, you can reach out to me at Brandi Sims PR, BrandiSims PR. We have a lot of conversations through the Branding PR podcast similar to this, and how people can better be equipped to deal with online communications for their clients as well as for their own personal brand. So we got a lot of tools, a lot of resources to help educate folks and get them comfortable as well as protected when they're online.
Thank you. Woo. Thank you all for your insight, your leadership, and your spirit today. Every perspective that you shared adds clarity and power to a world that really needs both, right? So our collective responsibility is not only to speak the truth, but also to teach communities how to find it, right? And this is what we're touching on here in this conversation. We want to find it, we want to filter it, and also we want to own it. So you showed us, each of you, that media literacy is not entirely academic. It's also protection, it's empowerment, it's safety, and it's a pathway to liberation in many ways. Dr. Brandi Sims, thank you for the brilliant spark that really led us here. And this has been just such a rich conversation. And also I want to thank every woman that's here on this stage: Lynn, Leilani, Allison. you have lent your voice to a really vital conversation today. And also just thank you for the work that you're doing outside of this space to advance trust in the world. So together, we're all making a difference here. We're really redefining media literacy as an act of agency, advocacy, and community care. Just thank you all so much. And thank you, the person who's watching. You are contributing to this conversation too, whether you know it or not. Thank you for your support and being here for this amazing conversation in the 100 Women to Watch campaign. Looking forward to welcoming you back, ladies, and same to the audience. Appreciate and your support. And bye for now.